you talked about if you're an investor and you want to invest in a business or whatever, you do it with other people's money. That's why Israel's using our army. They don't need to make their own army. They just use us. We're a flippant tool, right? We're nothing but an armed thug, and we do their bidding because they know how to get their money to invest. Right. They want the war. They'll use our money to do it. Right. Okay, well, if we kind of employ that same kind of tactic, right, as everyone here wants a solution and wants peaceful resolution to what we see as the real threat, right? It really comes from edification. Everyone here came here today to seek more knowledge, right? Everyone here has discussions with their colleagues and peers about these things on a regular basis. So, to your point, what can we do? Well, anything in social media, anything on television, anything that you read, think about, seeing, you don't believe it. We're really skeptical because everything's a lie. I mean, Caitlyn Jenner's the woman of the year. Right? Just cut it and call it a man, right? Or call it a girl. I mean, that's how. So, for us as individuals to win, if 9/11 is something that you think poses that winning argument, then champion, have book clubs. You have a book, you wrote a book. Get some copies of that book, have your friends over, and everyone discuss that book and how it applies. That's right. Right? Another one that exposes that kind of stuff was a movie, the TWA 800 TSA Transportation Safety Board, TSB guys wrote, made a movie saying it was blown up by a missile, man. And the thing was a lie. Whatever it is, just host and expand your group. Because the truth, real truth, it's all going to be okay at the end. Right. In the end, truth wins. Truth wins. Amen. That's just a statement. It's fact. It's true. Right? There it is. But
because the truth is the only reality.
Exactly. Right. So, get really philosophical, but anyway, but as to look as individuals, what can we do? Jesus had disciples, so go disciple truth.
But I think what you answered your question when you said the best way to move forward is to first share this information, first undeceive yourself about all of these things. But here we're talking about 9/11. When you become undeceived about 9/11, then you have something to offer. Right. You have information that you can share with your family, your wife, your coworkers, your church, your community, and in that way, people are becoming more open to this. There was a time, in the past when people didn't want to hear it. They think that you're anti-American or something. You're radical. But now we've had these wars. We had Iraq. We had Afghanistan. They got their bloody wars. And what did we get out of it? Nothing. A bill for $1 trillion. Guys walking around California, vets asking for a handout on every corner. Vets who are really sick. People who have lost their body parts and faces. Broken families. And a busted nation. So people are no longer so high and mighty as they were 8 years ago when we were in the middle of the wars. People now realize we've been shafted. We've been cheated big time. And they want to understand it. People are no longer so anti-truth.
Right.
And we have to 9/11 truth people have to keep the moral high road. They will try to get you to become more radical or suggest violence or to take racial positions or whatever. Can't do that. We're looking for the truth. Let's focus on how we were deceived and how we've been deceived into these wars. But we have to disengage from this whole logic of war and terrorism that's been imposed on us. And the only way you can do that is to undeceive yourself and others. So your coffee clutches and your groups, the groups that you have, that's the way to do
it. So to expand on it, taking things that are in public domain that are absolutely known. 9/11 is is a bitter pill to most. It's the scary monster in the closet, right? But there's a lot of stuff that's just out there, just definitively known. 60,000 Americans were murdered by the United States government from Gulf of Tonkin. That's fact. You can just look it up. It's not redacted, man. Yeah. You know we were led to war based on this lie, and the CIA made it up, and it's in their own books. When you start using those little things that are unrefuted, then you can lead people to the bigger pill, right?
And what you find is that the same people are behind the Gulf of Tonkin incident, the murder of Kennedy, and 9/11, and the bailout, and this. So you find that you're dealing with a small group of very highly connected people, but they're like the masters of all of this lies and deception and war. And when you understand who they are, we can disengage from them. We don't need them. We don't need their deception. Another question over here, Clark?
Yeah. Not to give any glimmer of hope about the current presidential field, I agree with everyone, and all of them are super pro-Israel. And and it's still too early to really get excited about anyone, if indeed that were to arise. There is something curious about Trump, however. I've noticed that the neocons are really pulling out the long knives against him right now. You may have noticed National Review in their latest issue has, the whole issue is like 22 essays from, I suppose they're all neocons, just attacking the guy. Now, Trump obviously is pro-Israel. And one has to ask themselves, why are they really after Trump? And I think, a speculative answer, I think he's unpredictable. In other words, I think they enjoy candidates who they can control.
Of course.
And so if I had to choose right now on the candidates running, I would, albeit on the lesser of evil concept, I would say Trump, because he doesn't come across as someone who's under the thumb of these people, even though he on the surface he appears to be pro-Israel.
Right.
That's not much to give hope for.
Right.
But that's just a quick comment. But secondly, I very much like your Russian doll analogy. You know, you open up a larger Russian doll, and there's a smaller one, and then a smaller one below that. And I was thinking, well, are there any cracks in terms of what the mainstream media will allude to about 9/11? And they keep talking about these 28 redacted pages that presumably Congress people can look at, congressmen can look at. And what's rumored is that these 28 redacted pages deal with the Saudi connections.
Right.
And once again, I'm trying to think, well, is that apparently the powers that be are aware that there's this growing awareness about the 9/11 deception. And if it seems to me that they're using that as a firewall, so to speak, that, okay, we'll allow this information out in public. And once again, I don't know if it in fact is a Saudi connection.
The Matryoshka doll that's that wooden doll they have in Russia where you open one doll, there's another doll inside, another doll inside. Those 28 pages is like another layer of that deception. And it's the layer where you open the doll, oh, Saudi funding. And you think, oh, so the Saudis are really behind it. That makes sense. But I kind of help you out by going straight to the inside of the doll.
That's correct.
And you find that it was a Zionist Israeli operation.
It's just more smoke.
It's more smoke. That's right.
Just more illusion.
Because what we see, same time, I have a chapter about P-Tech, a little company in Massachusetts that was had enterprise software on all the computers in the military and the government. And P-Tech was a little operation out of Quincy, Massachusetts, which was ostensibly, apparently, a Lebanese guy that owned it. But this little dodgy guy from Lebanon, with funding from a Saudi financier who was ties to terrorism, this enterprise software wound up being on the systems of all the top U.S. federal agencies. How? It was actually it was Israeli. It was and the person who was behind it was Israeli. But they were wearing this facade of being Muslim and being Saudi in order to make it look like it was that. And there's a host of companies involved in 9/11 that are exactly the same. Israeli-run companies that put out the appearance of being Muslim-owned companies. That's part of the whole deception. I really recommend, if you're interested in understanding how this kind of deception works in terrorism, to read John le Carré. Read my book, for sure, and you'll understand that, but when you read how the Israelis have been doing this for years, how they operate, the tactics they employ, the strategies they employ to trick people. Because they tricked the whole Israel too. They created the whole war on terrorism in Israel first. That was the incubation period, that was the model. When they saw how you do it, and they studied it, and they studied how people react, then they exported it to America. That's what we have now. So we are now getting the Israeli treatment that the Israelis themselves have been put under for decades. Henry, question?
It was an answer to him.
Okay.
With Trump, here's a possibility. I'm just a cynical kind of guy, conspiratorial guy. When the Federal Reserve Act was put in, there had been a couple decades of people being against the bankers' trust, very much against the banks. And the banks opposed the Federal Reserve Act, which made the people think it was a good thing. So maybe the neocons are opposing Trump to make us think it's a good thing.
So
I
agree. It's possible. Anything
well,
is
okay, won't
possible.
be jumped into politics, so and just vote third party, okay? Because anyone they're bringing forth is not your friend.
Well, most importantly, in terms of this presentation, none of them are 9/11 truth. And even Ron Paul, when he was a candidate, was anti 9/11 truth.
Right.
And 9/11 truth is the elephant in the room. It is the big thing. It is the seminal event of our time. It is what brought us this whole war, brought us this terrorism. And if you can't consider yourself to be an honest political candidate in this country if you ignore the biggest problem we have, which is 9/11 truth. If you don't address 9/11 truth and the war on terror in a meaningful, honest way, and if you're not straight with the American people, you don't deserve any power in this country.
Trump has a little bit.
Yeah, governments are evil, right? They are. They are the embodiment of evil. If you look through history, governments don't serve the people. People are served up to the governments that they put in place.
But it doesn't have to be that way.
No, I don't disagree. But I'm just suggesting that because we got off on this little political thing, that to try to find the best master is probably not worth your time.
But I would tell you one thing about this. We have a democratic republic, right? And our Constitution was written back in the 1780s, and was done. It's a tremendously important document and for the world. Switzerland copied our Constitution, basically word for word, and they created a democratic republic in Switzerland based on the U.S. Constitution. And their democracy works very, very well. They have 4 elections a year. People are obliged to vote. They vote on everything of importance, whether they join the EU or don't join the EU or whatever. The presidents serve for 1 year, and they have a stronger legislative than executive branch. We, on the other hand, have given incredible power to the executive branch, and we now live under a kind of like a dictatorship.
He's a dictator. For
A
60 days,
dictatorship.
he's clearly a dictator.
Yeah, and they have executive orders. And so we have to get back to the American system and the American Constitution as it was meant to be. That's what's happened. We have gotten so far off of that. So many of our laws, so many of our institutions are contrary to the meaning of the Constitution. We need to get back to where we should be. And it's because we're the most powerful country in the world. There's a big, well-funded, well-organized conspiracy to psych us out. We as American people are exposed to psychological warfare 24/7. That's what the media and the government are doing to us.
Has anyone seen that little thing, Tiny Dot? YouTube presentation on what the government is, Tiny Dot.
Tiny Dot.
Just everybody look it up, Tiny Dot, because that's the psychological warfare we're under. Right?
And we are now, you talk about the government, I would say that it's like what Rousseau said, is that we are now in a situation where we have been disenfranchised from the political operations of this country. Our elections are a fraud. Our elections are a sham. Electronic voting machines are completely rigged. And this election and election process is something we have nothing to say. But it's not a situation where the state is nothing more than the government. The government is the state.
Yeah.
And we are the third sector. We're like cattle.
Yeah.
And so in order, we have to take that back. And power does not relinquish its power easily. It will be a struggle. It will be a struggle, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a bloody one. Your question,
I
sir.
was just curious, if I may, to like do a little quick polling, a few things. Just raise your hands. How many that are here didn't already believe that 9/11 was some kind of inside job? It wasn't the true story that we were being told. Did anybody not have that understanding yet? Nobody? Has anyone here had it since the early days, a decade or more, when Christopher was somehow going, and none of us who now are probably prideful of our knowledge were the worst kind of fools for years and years? Because my epiphany has only been since Obama was elected, and I realized that there was no way anything is legitimate anymore because of his unbelievably convoluted background. And it's only then that I dug and began to understand the episodes in which the power is applied, starting with 9/11.
So since 2008.
So a process of that where I began to deconstruct premillennial dispensationalism and the whole Christian Zionist movement, and then understanding how part and parcel Talmudic Pharisaical mentality is literally in every cultural institution in this country now.
Yeah.
It's only when you understand the absolute thoroughness that we've been immersed in, right? And that's why that's why the big question is, let's face it, if we pin the tail on the donkey, who would tolerate? How are we gonna maintain the proper way, the proper magnanimous, proper, ethical, paradigm to deal with this problem?
Okay, to answer your poll, I guess I knew the instant that it fell. I'm an engineer.
Yeah.
It didn't fall, dude. It doesn't happen that way. So physics immediately told me it was something else. However, what it is, the monster, the evilness, right? Who is, even now, I mean, I haven't gone through this book to any degree to know who really is the perpetrator, right? So, but I don't know that we need to know that. Do we really need to know who the enemy is?
The question is then, do you want to allow there to be a sort of manslaughter instead of a first degree murder? But dealing with it in the post awareness phase is not really my prime concern, which leads me to the last question: is does anybody, when they talk to people in their lives these days, what's your experience? How do people respond to you, or do you bother to talk to anyone because it can have such massive repercussions on your professional life, your private life, your family?
Yeah, so how does it go? How does it go when you try to talk to other people about 9/11 truth?
Rejection.
Of all this stuff, because it's involved in Israel, it's too closely linked to World War II, and
But that's why that was created.
It's too close to what?
World War II, and the alleged crimes that happened there. So this is the problem. So I don't wish to lower the tone here, but in for a penny, in for a pound, right? I mean, it seems to me that a lot of the propaganda in World War II, and people's willingness to believe it, really paved the way for this.
Of course.
That they understood that mass deceptions could be fostered very easily
Of course.
on people. So, very distinguished researchers like Robert Farrison in France.
Yeah.
I want to hear your opinion on this. What do you think of things like the protocols of the elders of Zion? Robert Farrison is on record saying that this is a fraud.
Yeah. Well, it's like.
What do you think? I don't wish to sort of incriminate.
Yeah. Well, no, it's the. It was Hitler or Goebbels. The lie. The bigger the lie, And Goering said that's how you always do wars. You tell the public that they're under threat from somebody, and then you get a war. And a lot of what we're seeing here is exactly what the Nazis did. But on the other hand, the Nazis is not really the correct term. We've been, the whole nation of Germany. I live a lot of time in Germany, and the entire state of Germany is living under this collective guilt that doesn't belong to them. That is completely been foisted on them. What the Americans and the British did to Germany was infinitely more destructive than what the Germans did to Britain or to the United States. I'm not getting into the Jewish question. Just the bombing of German cities in '45, Dresden and Hildesheim and Hamburg and the firestorms, and then following that, the real death camps were Eisenhower's camps on the Rhine and Belgium and France, and where Germans were simply locked up inside barbed wire fences without water or food or shelter. They had to dig a hole in the ground, and of course many of them died, mostly because you can't survive like that. They were within 100 meters of the Rhine River, but no water was given to them. These are the real death camps. And in order to obscure those atrocities against the German people, like Henry Morgenthau's plan, that Germany must perish, that was the plan. That Germans should die. And Ilya Ehrenberg, the Soviet propagandist, told the Russian troops coming in and ethnically cleansing Eastern Europe of Germans that basically the only good German is a dead German. Kill them all, rape them, kill them, knife them. And that's what they did. These Asiatic troops. And they ethnically cleansed 15 million Germans from the Baltic area and Eastern Europe, in a process which was supposed to be humane, in which 2.1 million died. So it's like, then the British and the Americans and the Zionists gave us this whole spiel that the Nazis killed 6 million Jews and the Holocaust. Okay, that 6 million figure is some sort of like holy figure for the Jews, because when they discovered in Auschwitz that the number was greatly reduced from what they originally said, the big number didn't change at all. When the number of people killed at Birkenau, Auschwitz was reduced by like 90%. So as you said, they learned from World War II how you can impose a big lie on the entire world and get away with it. And in Germany, if you can often get in discussion. If you get in discussion in Germany and tell people that your country doesn't have that World War II isn't over, you don't have a peace treaty, you don't have a constitution, and most of what you've been told about the Holocaust is not true, they get defensive. They say, no, we did. We did it. They're like attached to that guilt. They don't want you to take that guilt away from them. And what has been most effective has been people like Ursula Haberbeck, this 80-year-old woman who lives in Bielefeld, who has simply, because in Germany you can't talk about this. It's forbidden. Even what I'm saying tonight would be like illegal in Germany. But when Ursula Haberbeck raises these questions on YouTube, where did these crimes happen? You can't have a crime without telling us where it happened. And her very clear-thinking questions to the German people has made many of them understand that, look, we've been duped. Our entire nation's been deceived and plundered by these same Zionists who are, imposing the war on terror on us. It's a strategy. They have milked Germany of millions of dollars, and they have destroyed the lives of so many Germans with a lie. And it worked like a charm. And as you see, Robert Morgenthau, he's the son of Henry Morgenthau, the one who was the mastermind of the destruction of Germany. And, if you haven't been to Dresden or some of these places and seen the photographs of what the Anglo-American assault did on Ash Wednesday in 1945 to Dresden, they'll tell you, 20,000, maybe 30,000 people died. I know a person who was there in January 1945 looking for his parents, and in the zone of destruction was the complete inner city. Complete destruction. Everything within this area was destroyed. He said the population was 600,000 people because it was chock full of refugees.
600,000.
600,000.
Never had an estimate like that.
No, you won't, because it's all downplayed. Because for people to imagine that the United States and Britain firebombed 500,000 people to death in one night on Ash Wednesday, Valentine's Day, 45. It's too much. But the truth will eventually come out.
But Britain, as the base of operations of the users in the city of London, has been the primary implement of that global power projection since 1800-ish.
Yes.
And it was only passed over to the United States at Bretton Woods after World War II.
Yes.
The sad thing about Britain is that Winston Churchill was probably the worst of all the Western culprits in creating the situation over his career.
But the thing is that the sad fact is that Britain suffers under this foreign regime, this parasite.
More than we do for a longer period of
as
time.
badly, for longer, and to a greater extent than we have. And it's really, really affected the British people tremendously. And they have been used in these wars, and you know, they take whole nations. But the Rothschilds have been involved in our politics since the Revolution. They brought Hessian soldiers over, you know, thanks to the Rothschilds. But the Rothschild, if you look at the long history of humanity, this Rothschild era began in the 1760s or so till today. But it won't last forever. It's just a family. It can go down. These things will change. Britain can regain its sovereignty. America can regain its sovereignty. The Rothschilds can be all arrested. Something like that should happen. If that were to happen, if the Rothschilds and these people were put out of business and their archives were to be exposed, we would have a great revelation of these secrets. And it says in the Bible, there will come a time when all secrets will be known. You know, you can't hide these things forever. Murder cannot be held forever. Cannot be hid forever.
So I just wanted to question that. So back to Robert Farrison, the premier researcher on this, has come out and publicly stated that the protocols ever designed was a big fake. Right?
He says the protocols were a fake.
He says that, yes.
Okay.
He's saying it was a fake.
Right.